All right, we're going to look at these six global problems. There are way more global problems than this, but these are the six that we're going to look at: population pressures, economic inequalities, global diseases, terrorism, coping with global problems, and equal rights based on gender. So here we go. Let's start with population problems. There's basically two population issues going on in the world right now. You have some places where population is still exploding, such as in sub-Saharan Africa. Very similar to the population, not as high, but still population growth rate similar to what you saw in the UK when Thomas Malthus was alive. So really fast. And then in some places, the world's population is negative. So like Japan. So I mean, if you think about this overall, we're at 500 million people in 650. We're at 2.5 billion in 1950. The mortality rates have decreased. The death rates have gone down. We're going to hit about 11 billion people in 2100. There's nothing short of famine, disease, etc. that can stop that. And food production has kept up. So when we look at the world, you can see here darker colored countries are where populations are going up at a significant rate, and below zero, so now there's population in decline, is in other countries. A lot of Eastern Europe countries, Germany, Japan's another famous one. They're losing people too because their death rates are higher. And so we can see here that moving forward, okay, Africa is by far forecasted their population growth. I love this chart. This chart shows where population is growing the most. So right now, in 1950, 2015, and 2050, you can see the chart here. So currently the United States was third, is third, and will drop to fourth because Nigeria is going to take a huge jump. So notice the 2050 one here. Notice the 2050 one, you see a lot more African countries move in, and the Asian countries have moved up as well. So population pressures are major on the earth. And so, I mean, that's even with some places, such as China, taking the one-child policy off the books and now the two-child policy, that they are doing pro-natalist policies. So the question is, how many people is too many people on the earth? They've tried to figure it out, and we don't know. I mean, we're not going to know until it's too late. And so that's what the carrying capacity means. And how does climate change fit in with this? We don't need to debate whether the planet is getting warmer or not, because it is. But what we're looking at is, okay, the greenhouse gases, and because we don't know basically the long-term effects. I mean, we're trying the Kyoto cards, there's the Paris Agreement that's been done, and so how's that going to play a role into this as well? And then another factor with this is migration. So when you're thinking about migration, there's really two types. There's internal, external. Internal is when it's rural to urban, most types, although in some places in the world it is urban to suburban, like here. The more developed a country it is, the more suburban to urban it would be. So take instance, though, the largest migration in the history of the planet by sheer numbers is China. From rural China into the inland, where you have just all of the cities and the factories. Okay, so this has led to squatter settlements big time. The squatter settlements, I don't have a picture of squatter settlements, but you're looking at like makeshift houses that get put up quickly, and these whole communities start to develop. It also has led to megacities. There's more people living in cities now ever than in world history, and as a percentage, we crossed over to over 50% people living in cities in about 2008. Now, the other type is external, where you're going from country to country. And so, I mean, this could be forced, like think Nazis, think partition of India, think currently in Syria, and I got some stuff here with Syria. Where's my Syria one? Here we go. We have people leaving Syria down here in the southeastern part of this map, and then coming into Africa. And also are coming to Africa and then eventually into Europe. Also, North Africa is a major migration route into Europe. And then when you're on top of this, I mean, people are displaced internally, and it's because of conflict. These are known as internally displaced people. And you can see here there's a lot of them in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's also in where climate's not necessarily the best to live, and so the resources can be scarce. And that gets at this concept, which is push and pull factors. Push and pull factors are basically, hey, reasons to come and reasons to go to a place. So, for instance, a lot of people, the number of people that move on the world stage to a different country and then send money back home, and that's called remittances. So, for instance, here in the United States, there's about $120 billion, and this was 2011, sent back to different countries, and you can see the specific amounts here. Those are called remittances, though. And so that would be a pull factor to the United States, is people living here and then sending money back to their families that they've earned. Now, another interesting test case with this would be Mexico, because Mexico has both legal and illegal immigration, depending on which border you're at, because they are taking people from Guatemala and Belize that are looking for a better life, and some of those people are part of a step migration process. They're just stopping over Mexico to get to the United States, but then also there are obviously Mexicans living, both legal and illegal. Now, the other thing here is that realize I did try to say the illegal side of things there, because people are definitely fighting against immigration. And you can see here why. Xenophobia is just the fear of outsiders. The other part to highlight here is just tourism, so part-time, especially as middle class has grown in China, you're going to see more and more tourism continue to grow. All right, so next, when you have all this migration, sometimes people are trying to escape economic inequalities. So they're escaping the economic inequalities because you look around the world and hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people struggle for food on a daily basis. Malnutrition can lead to all sorts of different things with stunted growth, poor mental development, high rates of infection, etc. So I like this picture down here because it looks at the fact that you have just unequalness. This is out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. I mean, you look at balcony pools over here, just poverty, not poverty-ridden, but very much middle class, and there's a wall literally in between them. A lot of this you can trace back to legacies of colonialism, that the money has stayed in the hands. I mean, South Africa has major land distribution issues to this day that date back to apartheid. You also have growth of child labor and human trafficking. A lot of this is sex trafficking. I mean, Saudi Arabia was the last country to ban slavery in 1960. There's about 250 million children between the ages of 5 and 14 that are currently work, and about 50 million in India alone. In many cases, whether human trafficking or child labor, the person who's getting recruited to work is getting promised a better life, and then experiences not good results with that, because then they get taken advantage of many times sexually. Next global problem, we'll go to disease. And our disease is AIDS. This is the one we're going to talk about, and also we'll talk about bacteria becoming more antibacterial resistant. And so when we go back, diseases have always been a major problem. Whether that's the Spanish flu epidemic or the Black Death, which would be your two most famous. That means Spanish flu epidemic, you might get as high as 100 million. You go back to the Columbian Exchange, how about smallpox? And so when we look at AIDS, first identified in 81 in New York and San Francisco, HIV, it slowly attacks the immune system. AIDS is the last step in the HIV process. And so what you're looking here is this spread, basically it's a sexually transmitted disease, but it's spread because there wasn't ways to prevent it for a long time. And it was just, the poverty and the ignorance to everything, and then the high cost of drugs led to the spread of it. There are about 36 million people right now living with AIDS, many of them in sub-Saharan Africa. They think that there'll be about 40 million dead from the disease when all is said and done, after the disease has run its course, and then it will start to decline after that. But one of the major concerns with diseases is, yes, they've always been there as killers. However, more and more the bacteria are becoming the viruses are becoming more resistant. They're becoming more resistant because of our dependency on drugs, and so they are evolving the viruses are evolving to try to stay alive, and then therefore our drugs need to get more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. And this relates very closely with our next topic, which is terrorism, because terrorists would love to use that kind of stuff. And so terrorism is definitely increased with more rapid technology and communication. You think of many terrorist attacks, it revolve around transportation networks, whether that's 9/11 down here in the right side, where you're seeing the plane fly into the World Trade Center, or you see car attacks and suicide bombings. it's been all over the world well before 9/11. You can go back to when the Algerians and the French were battling. You can go back to the Vietnam when the U.S. and French were there. You can go to Israel. You can go to Palestine. You can go to Northern Ireland. But I mean, terrorism has been here for a long time. Now, all the ones we're going to talk about are post 9/11, basically, and mainly the U.S. side of things here. I mean, so you got the 2 planes going to the World Trade Center. You got one going to the Pentagon on 9/11 and taken down by Osama bin Laden and his group Al Qaeda. And then since then, you have bin Laden killed. Excuse me. You have bin Laden killed early in the Obama administration. And then after that, the other person we want to talk about is Saddam Hussein, who you see down there in the lower left. Now, the U.S. has retaliation for part of the war on terror, is what George Bush called it, after 9/11. They went into Iraq in March of 2003, and it was a huge multinational coalition. The goal is to get Saddam Hussein out of office and to create a democratic state because they had weapons of mass destruction. Now, no evidence has been found of them. However, they did take Saddam Hussein out of office when he is literally found in a hole in 2006. Now, the other part of that was going into into Afghanistan, where the Taliban had merged as a power in Afghanistan in 1996 and provided training ground for Al Qaeda. That was the justification for going in there. And very conservative Sunni power, very conservative. No women in education or in the workplace. They had to be completely veiled in burqas. Men wear neckties and full untrimmed beards, banned on TV, movie theaters, photos, most music. And they had the Ministry of Promotion of Virtue and of Vice, and they just carried out everything. And they would kill people massively. And so the U.S. will go in and take the Taliban out with the help of a group called the Northern Alliance in October of 2001. And then Operation Iraqi Freedom is getting Saddam Hussein out of office. Now, part of the reason they were successful in this is the international organizations, whether that is the NGOs, the Red Cross, Amnesty International. Amnesty works to bring people who are not following the Declaration of Human Rights to try to show more of that. You got the United Nations playing a role here as well. That has been talked about earlier, where they're trying to provide peace and security. They did not specifically get involved with Iraqi freedom, for instance. But one of the big things the UN does at this point is they work to create cooperation to solve international problems, economic, social, humanitarian, etc., eradicating smallpox, child mortality, increasing literacy. And so those are some of their main issues at this point, and the UN does a great job with a lot of those. Our last one here is equal rights based on gender. Not even close there yet. You can see some of the things here, whether it's equal access to employment, representation in the government, or healthcare. And so here is, for example, women in the national legislature. Notice, below 10, 10 to 19, 20 is the national percentage of seats held by women. Not that high. Okay, so as a whole there, we know we have issues just to start. I mean, women had gained more political power after World War II, but you don't really have full equality. I mean, women are still make up way more of farmers and LDCs, even though the men own the land. You get a lot of the right to vote, but I mean, not a lot of economic freedom after World War I and protests really in the 1960s and with the feminist movements in the United States. China has the male cultural preference, which leads to a huge gender imbalance in China, even though Mao said women hold up half the sky too. And Mao had put in some new democratic marriage systems and was completely freedom, gets rid of some patriarchal stuff. But then when the one-child policy comes in, everybody wants a guy. In Saudi Arabia, they have a new plan going on. It's called Saudi Arabia 2030, where women for the first time can attend soccer matches and drive. And the last one to talk about is dowry deaths in India, where you have dowry deaths, which has continued through India, even though it's illegal, where women have committed suicide because their families cannot pay the money to the men's family for the marriage. And so even though there are a few women leaders throughout the world, there are some powerful ones. I mean, Angela Merkel in Germany being one of the most powerful leaders in the world today. And you really have mean, there are very few women leaders, and it's something to work on. And also, it wouldn't be a global problem.